Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're making no-bake cookies. Preacher cookies, cow patties, whatever you call them. They are everybody's favorite and they're perfect for summertime because we don't have to turn the oven on to heat up the house. Then again, they're perfect for any time because everybody loves them. I mean, they're chocolate and peanut butter. What's not to love? They just have a few basic ingredients and there's lots of substitutions you can make. With the basic recipe, you are already gluten-free and egg-free. And if you need them dairy-free, you can substitute the butter for coconut oil and the milk for some kind of plant-based milk. So, these are good for all kinds of food allergies too. But what we need is somewhere between 1.5 cups and 2 cups of sugar. You can kind of adjust it to suit your taste. And you can use some brown sugar or a sugar substitute. 1/2 cup of butter or 1 stick. And you can substitute that for 1/2 cup of coconut oil, like I said. 1/2 cup of milk. And you can substitute that too if you need to. 1/4 cup of cocoa. A teaspoon or so of vanilla. 1 cup of peanut butter and 3 cups of oatmeal. Now I'm using quick oats because I like that texture better in these cookies. Some folks I know do use the long cooking oats, the old-fashioned oats with the thicker cuts. I'm not so crazy about that, but you do whatever you want because these are your cookies. Now we're going to start by combining the first 4 ingredients, in a pot over medium-low heat. You do want to do medium-low because if you get them too hot, what that will do is it will make your cookies crumbly. So if you've ever had them come out crumbly, it's because you just cooked them a little too fast. Go ahead and put your butter and your milk in there. While that's warming up, go ahead and add your 1/4 cup cocoa to your sugar. And stir that just a little bit, and that way it will mix in your milk and your butter easier. You don't have to do that. If you don't do it, it's still going to mix in when it gets hot. It just makes it a little easier. You don't have to be crazy about this. All we're trying to do is keep from dumping some great big lumps of cocoa in with our milk and our butter, because it does take just a minute to get those dissolved, and it takes a little extra stirring if you don't mix it in with your sugar first. And go ahead and add your sugar and your cocoa in with your butter and your milk. And like I said, you want this kind of medium-low. Don't heat it too quick. And we're going to bring this to a boil. As it's heating, you do want to kind of keep stirring it. You don't have to stir it real fast, but you want to make sure you keep the sides of your pot cleaned off because you don't want any undissolved sugar on the sides. And you also want to make sure you keep the corners of your pot cleaned out. And, go through the middle so that it doesn't scorch and burn in the middle. But on medium-low heat, that shouldn't be a problem. You don't have to stir it real vigorously. And if you've got to stop stirring it for just a second, especially when you're first starting, it's not going to be a big deal. Like if you didn't get your wax paper to scoop your cookies out on or something and you leave it for 15 seconds to go grab your wax paper, it should be all right. Probably don't want to leave it any longer than that because if it scorches, it will taste bad. And let's face it, ingredients are way too expensive to waste these days. I mean, my goodness, the price of sugar, and now with the chocolate shortage, cocoa has gotten ridiculous, and we had the vanilla shortage, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, and it still hasn't really come back down much. So we definitely don't want to mess up chocolate and sugar that we're cooking together. Okay, once they come to a boil, and mine have, I'm going to take my phone out here so I can see what time it is. You want to cook it 1 to 2 minutes. Normally a minute would be enough, but today it's raining here and it's very humid, and if you don't cook them a little bit longer when it's humid, they won't set up. If you don't cook it long enough, they won't set up. They'll be really runny, and when you pick them up, they'll just kind of, well, you can't even pick them up. They'll be too gooey to pick up. So when it's humid, do a couple of minutes. And high altitudes, I think you have to do a couple of minutes. Folks are always asking me about that. I'm right at 2,000 feet, a little bit under it, so I don't really have to do anything extra. But at high altitudes, I would guess you probably would need to cook it the 2 minutes too. So, and at this point, when it starts boiling, you don't want to leave it. You want to stir it and don't stop, not even for a second or two, because it will scorch. And like I said, keep it on that medium low, because if you turn it up hotter and you bring it to a boil too fast, that's what makes them all crumbly. All right, that should be good. You can also see the color kind of changes. It gets a little bit darker, and you definitely won't have stuff sticking to the edges of your pot. The granulated sugar and stuff, it won't be sticking to the edges of your pot. It will all be incorporated in your mixture here. It's not really dough in your mixture. I don't know if you can see or not, but it is a little darker, and that color change kind of lets you know that it's cooked enough. And like I said, also you don't have granulated sugar left sticking on the edges of your pot. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my cup of peanut butter in here, and so it will melt, and get my vanilla in. And you do want to kind of work fast, because once it gets cool, it will start setting up, and then you won't be able to scoop it out and make cookies out of it. It'll just be a glop of chocolate and peanut butter. Put at least a teaspoon of vanilla in there. And I'm using my Vanilla Feeds Tomorrow. I'll put the link in the description for that. A young man named William makes this, and he donates 100% of the proceeds to Second Harvest Food Bank to feed hungry people in this area. I mean, 100% of the proceeds, not the profit, the proceeds, which is incredible. And once you get the vanilla and the peanut butter all stirred up, then you're going to add the oatmeal. And it will take just a minute for your peanut butter to melt and dissolve. And I know somebody's going to ask if you can melt it in the microwave. I never have. I haven't found that it was necessary. It's almost kind of like a fudge that you're making, and then you're adding the peanut butter and the oatmeal to it. All right, that's mixed up good now. We'll go ahead and dump our oatmeal in there and stir that up, and then we can scoop them out. And yep, that makes a pot full. It's going to make a lot of no-bake cookies. These are really good for potlucks. A lot of folks have them on their holiday cookie list. They make them at holidays, every Christmas and stuff. They're on their list of stuff that they share with friends and family at the holidays. So it doesn't matter if you're having a 4th of July cookout or a church potluck or an office get-together. Everybody really does like these. They're one of those old-fashioned favorites that we all grew up on, and they're just good. I said I was going to make them and send some here and send some there, and Alex was like, they're all going here. So she's claimed the whole batch, but I might manage to sneak a few out to other folks. And you can see this is already kind of starting to set up. And it's definitely pulling off my pan and stuff. And that's what you want. That means your cookies are going to set up. If you see that when you're mixing your oatmeal in and it's kind of pulling off the sides of your pan. All right, now scoop them out, spoon them out, whatever. Some folks flatten them out. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And I guess depending on how much oatmeal you put in them, like I've seen some that just run out. Mine usually do not. But you can flatten them out a little bit, or you can leave them thicker. I don't make these real big because they are pretty rich and folks can always eat an extra one. And you can see here I have a rack under my wax paper. I have that rack under my wax paper because these are hot. And if you scoop it out on your countertop without it being on something, a cutting board or a rack or something, you're going to have little bits of wax on your countertop because the cookie's going to melt the wax on the wax paper. Now, as I'm working here, they're cooling down along the edges. So what I'm going to do is just fold it kind of back together into a dough ball, sort of, so I'm not getting little bits off the edges, because the little bits are cooling down and they are setting up. The most time-consuming part of this process is scooping the cookies out. And they're starting to cool down now, so they're starting to set up. And that's why I'm able to touch them. They're still pretty hot. Those first few I would not have touched with my fingers. But once they start to cool down, you can take your fingers and shape them. They really take almost no time. It takes maybe 3 minutes, 4 minutes for them to come to a boil, because you're not doing it over real high heat. And then once they come to a boil, you're just going to cook them for 1.5 to 2 minutes, and then it's going to take 3 or 4 minutes for you to scoop them out. And that's kind of all there is to it. And I don't even know how many cookies we got here. This is getting too cool to mess with, really. But let's see, each one of these rows, except for this last one here, has half a dozen, and I probably had another cookie or two in there. So we got 1, 2, 3... over 3 dozen cookies. Now, even with ingredient prices going up like they are, we can make these 3 dozen cookies for way, way, way less than what you can get a half a dozen no-bake cookies for in a grocery store deli. And these are so much better. I don't know what they're putting in them in the grocery store deli. I'm guessing it's probably some kind of a mix instead of the basic sugar and cocoa and butter. And they sure are not using real butter, and probably not using real vanilla because of the cost. But for less than a half a dozen, you can have 3.5 dozen at home or so. They are so easy. Like literally start to finish, you can have these made in 10 minutes, maybe just a tiny bit more, but it's not going to take long. And the kids can even make them, because you're not dealing with that much heat. If you have older kids, they can make these. And, you know, even the younger kids can scoop them out, which, like I said, is the most time-consuming part of it. And in just a few minutes, you can see here, like while I was scooping them out, they're cool enough to pick them up and eat them, and they shouldn't fall all over the place, you know, like they shouldn't droop down. As soon as they get halfway cool, you can let the kids enjoy them. I hope you give these a try, whether it's this summer or whether it's this Christmas. They are so very easy, and everybody loves them. Like I said at the beginning of this, chocolate and peanut butter, what's not to love? No-bake cookies, cow patties, preacher cookies, whatever name you know them by, I'm sure you grew up with them, and I'm sure you loved them as much as everybody else does. Before we go, I want to leave you with Philippians 4:7. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. You know, the Bible tells us in this world we're going to have tribulation. There's going to be hard times. But if we have Jesus Christ in our heart, if we know Him as our Savior, we can have peace in our hearts and our minds, even though we're walking through some terribly turbulent times. Thank you so very much for joining us in the Hillbilly Kitchen. If you haven't already, please don't forget to click like and subscribe before you leave. Share our videos with your friends. And until next time, remember to put God first.